Full disclosure here, I lost footage of everything in my first playthrough until around chapter 16. Normally I would replay these sections, but it's the holidays and I'm in the middle of a renovation and it's quite taxing to do so. I have some bias here. I don't really care for Uncharted as a series. Most of my distaste for the Uncharted series can be summed up as the gameplay's on rails, there is far too much combat and not enough of the cool adventuring aspect, and there's a story that's far too bloated with internal drama for no reason, and there's no consequences to really anything that happens. I find that in general, Uncharted is rated highly not because it's a good game, but because it has the illusion of being a good game. Exciting things happen in Uncharted with very little player input or control. For fun and for your reference, this is how I would rank the original Uncharted series. Top spot goes to Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. Number 2 would be the first half of Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception. Then I would say Uncharted Drake's Fortune is third. And then finally, the second half of Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception. I decided to get Uncharted 4 because it was getting universal praise. People were saying that it's the best Uncharted game and saying that the new mechanics and the grappling hook were just amazing. I bought into the hype, but I also figured I may as well see the series through, and maybe, just maybe, I'd be proven wrong. But Uncharted 4 was everything I expected it to be. This section includes spoilers, so skip to this time code if you wish to avoid them. This will be a long section because Uncharted is largely a story-driven game, and this section will also include minor spoilers for Uncharted 1 through 3 as well. For the story summary, I'm going to do it in timeline order as opposed to the order that Uncharted 4 presents the story in. Uncharted 4 presents its story in a mess of multiple flashbacks and flash forwards to multiple different points throughout the story. The game starts with Nathan in an orphanage and his brother ends up helping him sneak out since he's likely over 18 or he's just completely abandoned the orphanage altogether. Nate and his brother go to some woman's house who their father sold their historian mother's journals to. They have a brief conversation with her and she ends up dying from presumably a heart attack. Instead of doing what rational people would do and explain their situation to the cops, they make a break for it and they run away. Nate and Sam decide to leave their old lives behind and take up the surname Drake and go adventuring. Sam is infatuated with the Avery treasure. While looking for leads on the Avery treasure, Nate ends up in a Panamanian prison with Sam and new ally Rafe. Nathan finds some information, a cross of St. Dismas, and the prison warden, who Rafe paid to get them locked up, wants cut in on the deal for the Avery treasure. Instead of doing the smart thing of agreeing, then backstabbing him later, Rafe kills the warden and the group is forced to escape. Sam is shot during the escape attempt and Nathan is forced to flee with Rafe. Nathan assumes Sam is dead. Somewhere in between here, Uncharted 1 through 3 happen. But it turns out that Sam actually survived, and after 15 years, his cellmate, a drug lord named Hector Alcazar, organizes a breakout and he escapes. Hector Alcazar demands that Sam find Avery's treasure within 3 months, or he'll find him and presumably torture and kill him. Fast forward now to the current story. Nathan is working for a salvaging company, mostly doing mundane things like pulling semi-trailers out of the river for their cargo. Nathan is clearly missing the adventurous lifestyle. Nathan's boss offers him a potentially illegal salvage job in Malaysia. Nathan refuses and instead wants to be legitimate. Sam and Nathan meet up and Sam convinces Nathan to go on a final adventure to find Avery's treasure once and for all. The two meet up with Sully and they go to an auction to buy another one of the St. Dismas crosses and they find Rafe also trying to buy it. Nadine, the leader of the mercenaries, beats up Nathan because strong women. Sam and Nathan end up stealing it and escaping. They learn that their next destination is Scotland and conveniently on Rafe's property, crawling with mercenary forces.
Recognize the shape? It's Madagascar.
After Scotland, their exploits lead them to Madagascar. There, Nathan feels guilty about lying to Elena, who then shows up, cries, and leaves. Instead of doing the smart thing and going after her, Nathan continues adventuring with his long-lost brother. Eventually, they find Libertalia, make a joke about how they hope that there's no pirate ghosts, and continue on their way. You do an extended stint in Libertalia where Sam and Nathan get their asses kicked by Nadine at the same time. And then you meet up with Rafe, who reveals that he was the one who broke Sam out of prison, and Hector Alcazar had nothing to do with anything and he was dead the whole time. Rafe shoots at Nathan and Sam knocks him out of the way and Nathan falls. Then Elena and Sully just kind of show up out of nowhere, and then, you know, everything goes okay and you go after Sam. And then you found that Avery was really greedy and stole everyone's treasure, and he protected it by booby-trapping a bunch of mummies underground. Elena, Sully, and Nathan are ready to call it quits, but Sam wants to keep going. Eventually he concedes, but luckily the bridge breaks and Sam goes off on his own. Nathan obviously goes after Sam, alone, because that's just how all the Uncharted games end. Nadine says that they have enough treasure and she wants to leave, but Rafe continues on to Avery's ship. Sam gets pinned by a bit of lumber, and Nathan and Rafe have a quick time event sort of fight. Nathan obviously kills Rafe. Through sheer willpower, Nathan and Sam lift the pillar pinning Sam and they both escape. They get back home and everyone goes their separate ways. Elena then reveals to Nathan that Sam gave her some coins which she used to buy the salvage business. Then we flash forward to the future and get a glimpse of Nathan's emasculated future. Now we're going to jump into the discussion. I think Uncharted 4's story is actually quite bad. It's full of plot holes, and it requires a lot of conveniences and coincidences to actually work. It's poorly paced, especially in the beginning. It focuses too much on what we don't care about, and not enough on what we actually do care about. It feels like a rehash of the second half of Uncharted 3 with all the forced drama between Nate and Elena, which is the worst part of Uncharted 3, I may add. The introduction of Uncharted 4 is a completely disjointed mess. It starts with a flash forward to, I guess, approximately just past the midpoint in the game. That's followed immediately by a flashback to Nathan as a child, followed by a flash forward, but still a flashback to Nathan as an adult in prison about 15 years before the events of Uncharted 4. Then you get the true start with Nathan working a job in salvage, clearly unsatisfied with his now mundane life, which is followed up by meeting with his brother, which leads into another flashback of Sam's escape from prison. Then you actually get to start with the meat of the game, and that is Chapter 6, which can easily be about 2 hours in. To say it starts slow is an understatement. Starting slow can honestly be a death sentence for your game. There is action, and there is some moderately interesting things going on, but it's all done for the sake of ham-fisted exposition, and it's done in a horrible way. It takes a long time to actually understand what the hell you're doing and what your endgame goal is. There is one very clear and glaring reason for starting the game this way. Nathan's long-lost brother, Sam. I think the existence of Sam is just terrible. To me, it reads like really poorly written fan fiction. This is Nathan's big brother, Sam, and he taught Nathan everything he knows. Since nothing is known about Sam, and he's a critical character for the plot, and Nathan's motivations for leaving his cozy life to adventure again, some time needs to be invested in fleshing him out. Sam's existence is never mentioned once outside of Uncharted 4. They tiptoe around the subject, saying that Nathan just didn't like talking about it. To me, it feels like that episode of Clone High, Litter Kills, literally.
Tonight, on a very special Clone High, one of the clones you've grown to love will be horribly killed. This is not some cheap-ass stunt where we lamely introduce a new character just to kill him off. A clone dies tonight.
My biggest complaint outside of Sam's questionable origins is that he's just a terrible character. He's exactly the same as Nathan, with very little to make him into his own character besides having an obsession with the Avery treasure. We've already seen that obsession arc within Nathan in Uncharted 3, so that even isn't anything new. No, the worst thing about Sam is that he just ruins everything he touches for everyone. Sam is largely the driving force to get Nathan back into the treasure hunting and adventuring game from his boring suburban life. I can accept that, but I find the way it's handled laughable. Sam fabricates a lie to essentially guilt-trip Nathan into helping him. This rubs me the wrong way, mainly because there's no reasonable way to foresee the lie as being anything other than exactly what we saw. We play the escape sequence as Sam. There's no reason to believe that anything that happens in the escape is anything other than exactly what we played. There is one section right before you arrive at Libertalia where Sam looks like he's about to say something to Nathan, then conveniently people show up and you have to go and he doesn't say anything. The worst part is Nathan says in the game that all he had to do was check. He had to go look on the news to see if Hector Alcazar was dead or alive or whatever. And it doesn't happen. It's very bad storytelling. There were already seeds planted of Nathan wanting to go back to his life of adventuring when he's eating dinner with Elena. He's clearly not happy with his steady job and a rather mundane existence in suburbia. Sam could have just told Nathan the truth and Nathan could probably be enticed to go. The only reason the plotline exists is to create drama between Nathan and Elena, and you know what? I'm a bit tired of it. We've seen it in Uncharted 2 and especially in Uncharted 3. It's beating a dead horse at this point. Elena even states that she's not mad that he went on an adventure. She's mad that he lied to her about it. She says he could have just ended up dead somewhere and she'd have no idea. It's pointless drama that's useless to the story. It's also a shame because Naughty Dog's writing team should just know better. They should know Elena and Nathan have this dynamic and have built up a relationship past the point of petty lies. It made sense in Uncharted 2 that they would have broken up based on Nathan's lifestyle and decisions. It makes sense that they would have gotten married after Uncharted 2 and it just didn't work out, so in Uncharted 3 they're kind of on a split. They tried to make a marriage work, but they ended up in a predictable failure. After the events of Uncharted 3, there was closure. We saw that Nathan had grown up, he did his final adventure, and he was willing to settle down. The issue I have with that drama is that we've already gone through this in 3. It's a pointless arc that delivers nothing we haven't seen and backpedals on the character development that occurs in 3. It makes the story weaker. Nathan's flaws are largely that he's selfish. He wants the adventure and discovery not for the riches themselves, but for the pride. He found it. He alone figured out the puzzle. He found El Dorado, Shambhala, Ubar. Him alone. He could very easily be enticed to go on another adventure for that smug satisfaction he gets. The treasure is just a nice little bonus, like a cherry on top of the adventure sundae. Nathan's motivations are actually quite similar to Rafe's. Unlike in Uncharted 2 and 3, where the villains are rich and are after power from mystical artifacts rather than wealth, Rafe does not have these same motivations. Rafe is rich, and his motivations are entirely for riches. He is obsessed with making a name for himself by discovering Avery's treasure rather than the wealth associated with it. This makes him feel like a really lame villain, and I think easily the weakest in the series. There is zero reason for Rafe to go to the lengths that he does. My favorite parts of Uncharted 1 and 2 were the supernatural elements. Finding El Dorado and Shambhala was fun and memorable. The games start off innocent enough, searching for a golden idol and lost riches or a giant sapphire, only to find that there was a lot more at stake. It was great. Finding out that Avery's treasure was exactly what you thought it would be this whole time was very underwhelming. The joke about hoping there were no ghost pirates was kind of a slap in the face to the previous games in the series. Nadine, who is a mercenary and who does need the money, even gets cold feet and wants to back out throughout the course of the game, often stating that it's not worth it. I find that Nadine is just a terrible character. Nathan has been proven to be the world's greatest fist fighter throughout the course of 3 games, and then Nadine shows up and beats Nathan up like he's never thrown a punch in his life, in a scripted sequence no less, which makes it even worse. Then again later in Libertalia, she beats Nathan and Sam in a 2-on-1. It's just absolutely ridiculous, like most of Uncharted 4.
Shame we're not on the same side.
This is really something that I just can't give a pass to, and it's rubbed me the wrong way ever since Uncharted 1. Naughty Dog refuses to have any kind of protagonist be killed in Uncharted. I wouldn't normally care except for the fact that they set it up, but they backpedal it in every single game. Sully gets shot in Uncharted 1, but he's okay because it hit Drake's journal.
No way.
Lazarevich meets up with your group and he's gonna execute one of them during Uncharted 2. No, it's just the cameraman we met 30 minutes ago.
Hold on, alright? Just hold on. Come on, stay with
Elena getting mortally wounded at the end of Uncharted 2? Nope. Perfectly fine at the end because reasons?
How scared were you that I was gonna die?
4.
4?
Yep.
They actually do it twice in Uncharted 3 just with Charlie Cutter. Once is when he's fighting Nathan and Sully puts his gun up to his head and he's gonna shoot him. And then the second time is when they light the top of the castle on fire and he's gonna jump off the roof and oh, he's fine because he just broke his leg.
No. Hurry. Go.
Sully getting shot in 3?
What? No.
Nope, it was just a dream, you big goof. The writing team has no stones. They set it up in 4 for either Nathan to die or Sam, but it doesn't happen. Instead, they choose to have everything end up fine. It's just bad storytelling. A character's death can provide ample motivation to invoke emotional response, but Uncharted as a whole has just teased it, but they're too cowardly to actually go through with it. It's disingenuous and shows the writing team has no artistic integrity. They would rather write a crowd pleaser where no one gets their feelings hurt because their favorite character was killed. Always remember, when you're writing a story,
it doesn't hurt to do something absolutely outrageous.
gameplay is unapologetically broken down into segments, like every other Uncharted game. There's cover shooting, on-rails climbing, light platforming and puzzle solving, the set pieces, and Uncharted 4 also adds driving sections. The driving sections are a miss for me. To accommodate the driving sections, it seems like they cut down a bit of the combat. I don't mind this at all, since I've always felt the combat in Uncharted was excessive, to the point where it was detrimental to the experience. The issue I have is that it's just boring driving. There's nothing to it other than going from A to B. It's realistically no different than just having the characters on foot. Often you're forced down a linear path in set pieces. Shooting is the same as we've always seen. You snap to cover, you take pot shots, you move up, you fight the next wave, more cover, more pot shots, more waves. Puzzles are more of the same as well. They aren't as obvious as the puzzles in Uncharted 1 or 2, but they're still the kind of puzzles that are easy, but they make you feel like you're smart or clever, which I guess is what people kind of want out of these games. Uncharted 2 introduced stealth to the series, and as a whole, there's really only been 2 enemy states: completely unaware and completely aware. The second you're spotted, every single enemy will converge on your position with the intent to exterminate you with extreme prejudice. There are claims you can re-enter the stealth state in Uncharted 4 by hiding, but I found it virtually impossible to do outside of a very few small handful of circumstances. The only time I was reliably able to do it was when I could dive into a body of water and hide in some destroyed buildings. Stealth has never been a strong aspect of these games, and like a lot of stealth, it feels like it's neglected and tacked on. Stealth in Uncharted has always felt like it's a way to thin out the numbers a bit before you get to the inevitable shootout with 50 or more goons. And it's really no different here. Uncharted 4 is particularly bad about its climbing segments. There are a lot of them, probably more than in any other Uncharted game. I wouldn't be surprised if in every single one of them there was a part where Nathan is scripted to fall only to catch something and continue on. Nathan falls so much that it loses any semblance of intensity. It happens so often I was just straight up expecting it in every single climbing section. But we have to talk about the grappling hook. The grappling hook gets a lot of praise, and I feel like it is totally unjustified and undeserved in the context of Uncharted 4. The grappling hook is just like everything else in Uncharted 4, totally on rails. You have very few sections where you can utilize it in any meaningful way, and it's almost always delegated to scripted on-rails climbing segments. If they doubled or tripled the amount of grappling points in the game, then maybe it could have had some meaningful use in combat. As it stands, it's just like climbing, totally on rails. Here's a part where you have to use the grappling hook. I don't like having my handheld. There are very few sections where you can use the grappling hook in combat to some effectiveness, but it's mostly for the scripted sequences. Swinging on the grappling hook is basically worthless because when you're spotted, you need to be behind cover, otherwise you're going to die. It's all flash and no substance, which is what I think a lot of people think exclusively when they're talking about Uncharted. Presentation is the only thing Uncharted does really well. It's probably the only thing Uncharted has ever done well. The game goes to great lengths to praise itself over its graphics. Nathan will frequently stop and say, "Wow, look at that view. Yeah, but what a view!" just to force the graphics to your attention. Before Uncharted 4 was released, I watched a video about how Naughty Dog was actively making accessibility improvements to allow particularly disabled gamers to enjoy their game. Naughty Dog is quite proud of their accessibility changes, So much so that when I first started, aim assist was automatically cranked up to 10. When it's set that high, Nathan snaps from literally half a screen away to enemies' heads, which is absolutely ridiculous. I turned it down severely, probably like 1 to 4-ish, I don't really remember, and I forgot about it. I do appreciate many of the changes, and I think it's a worthy endeavor to make games more accessible to more people. The ability to hold down a button instead of mashing, to me, is an incredibly welcome change. The obvious question I have is just, why? They recognized that mashing was terrible for some particularly disabled players, and they made a change to allow it to be changed to simply holding the button down. From what I've read, everyone turned that feature on. Casual players, YouTubers, big name reviewers, myself. The fact that they decided it was better to improve it by adding an accessibility feature rather than just, I don't know, removing the mashing altogether, just kind of baffles me. It's the same thing with the auto assist cranked up as high as it is when you start the game. Why? Do they have no confidence in their player base's skill level? I think Uncharted has never been a series that is designed to be hard. I think it's designed to be cool first. I often find that there's sections in Uncharted that are more frustrating than well designed and difficult. I find that they often just throw too many enemies at you and there's a lot of deaths because of that. But on the flip side, there's always checkpoints and you can just checkpoint hop and learn where the enemies spawn and things like that. But back on topic, Uncharted 4, I would say the hardest part of Uncharted 4 is the finale. Uncharted games always end in an absurd shootout that usually takes far too long. Then backpedals a little bit, gives you a little bit of a break, and you do a standard one-on-one encounter at the end. The finale was by far the hardest part for me, especially the final fight with Rafe. I thought it was actually quite poorly designed. Rafe can kill you very easily, and you need to hit him an absurd number of times to finally beat him. Otherwise, like I said, it's standard modern game design. Do it until you get it right, checkpoint, same thing for the next section. Uncharted 4 is probably the longest in the series by quite a margin. It felt very drawn out, and I would say quite needlessly. Uncharted 4 was about 11.5 hours. Uncharted 1, 2, and 3 are about 6, 8, and 9 respectively. The way the game jumps between the various flashbacks and flash forwards is something I have some extreme distaste for. It destroys the pacing of the story for no real reason. You also spend a lot of time in Libertalia. That's very atypical, as usually the final 2 or 3 chapters take place in, you know, Shambhala or Ubar, or in this case Libertalia. But you reach the island of Libertalia at like chapter 15, and you spend almost a third of the game on the island. It kind of makes it a bit boring, honestly, because you're seeing the same stuff for a very long time. I'm probably in the minority here, but I don't find the series very entertaining. I want to like it, and I can see why people like it, but there really just isn't anything here that I can really get behind. The climbing and set pieces are completely on rails, and I can't dissociate myself from that feeling. It makes the climbing sections largely into just mashing the jump button to make it go slightly faster, because I know there's virtually no control anyways. They constantly have these climbing segments where Nathan falls or something old breaks and there's no tension. I went off in a tirade in the Dark Souls 3 review about the overuse of ambushes, and that also applies here with the falling. Nathan falls or has a near fall with almost every single climbing segment and set piece in the entire game. Did nobody notice that in Naughty Dog? Was it some inside joke? I don't know. It's just, I don't know why it's in the game. I think the shooting is boring because it encourages you to sit and wait behind cover. There's far too many enemies at any given time, and it gets boring killing hundreds of guys just for the sake of it. The new driving sections are largely just boring A to B travel. There's not really a whole lot to like here. I think the best part of Uncharted has always been exploring the areas and the puzzles, and they've always sidelined that for the combat and the climbing, and I don't know why, because they could have made something really special, and they just kind of don't. It's no secret that I think the Uncharted games are pretty average at best, if not downright bad in some aspects, except presentation, where it clearly prides itself in. They're all actually quite boring, bland cover shooters with scripted climbing and set pieces that have no real substance. Shooting is boring, and they make you do so much of it that you're totally desensitized to it by the end of the game. Climbing sections in Uncharted 4 are probably the worst they've ever been, rife with falls and just so many of them. The story is told in a very disjointed and jarring way, and all the characters, protagonists and antagonists, have very weak motivations. The lack of a supernatural element, a staple of the Uncharted series, was pretty disappointing to me. Graphics, motion capture, and voice acting are all there to reinforce the story, the gameplay, and the overall experience. These things just can't carry a game on their own. But that's exactly what Uncharted 4 tries to do. The whole game could probably have taken place in 8 hours, and I think it would have been better than the 11-hour game we got. Honestly, my opinion about Uncharted is if you want to play the best Uncharted game, you should just go play the Tomb Raider remake because it's at least fun, and you're not stuck snapped to the wall for the entire runtime of the game.
Next time on Dragon Ball Z.